Hi, this is Brandon. I want to welcome you guys that are doing groups all over Kitsap County and beyond. I'm here with Karsten and Grant. Both of these guys are NLC students, the New Life Leadership College. And what are you guys studying?
I'm in a class talking about Jesus, the Messiah, and learning about the covenants in the Bible, and then also taking a class on identity and vocation, just learning how we grow in courage of what is our vocation and what are we growing in. And it's I feel like it's a good start for understanding, okay, where am I gonna go with my ministry and with my life, and setting up for the rest of my college in a couple more years.
Cool.
So it's cool, it's a good start, yeah.
Good. What about you, Karsten?
I'm studying ministry leadership, and so I'm in the Jesus Messiah class also. I do have a higher grade than Grant does currently.
That's the best part of school.
It's been fun so far.
He can start off better, I'll end better.
Okay, there you
we'll
go.
say that.
Okay.
And then also in church ministry essentials.
Got it.
Having fun with it. We actually just wrote a paper on a bit of Revelation, so I'm excited to jump into this part of this.
Great. Well, we're just going to look with you guys at Revelation, and we're going to go through kind of the last section of chapter 1. And where do you want to start?
Yeah, I was really looking at first is, in verse 7 it says, look, he comes with the cloud of heaven. So what do you guys think what that means? Like, you want to unpack that for me?
Yeah, well, my favorite part of that is the way John writes this. He's actually building it like a big cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Right? Like, don't you like a good movie with a cliffhanger?
I hate them.
You hate them?
I just like to know, I don't like surprises. Just tell me what's going to
Do
happen.
you guys ever binge watch? Like binge watch some TV?
Yeah, we have.
There's certain shows that like right when it ends,
It's
you're like, I
weird.
have to watch the next one. John wants it to feel like that, and I think we miss it sometimes. So he says, look, he comes with the clouds of heaven, right? So the clouds of heaven is this picture of him coming on a cloud. Now, I don't know about you, but I always picture in my head Jesus floating on a little fluffy cloud.
Yeah.
In fact, there's 2 spots in the Bible where it says Jesus either leaves or comes on a cloud. When Jesus ascends to heaven, it says he ascends in a cloud. And so I always picture it. In fact, one of my friends would always say, it's a cloudy day. Jesus could be coming back today. What's funny is to a Roman, that's not what they pictured. They didn't picture Jesus floating on a cloud. They actually pictured Caesar on a cloud. See, whenever Caesar went to battle, he would have all of his chariots and soldiers and everybody lined up in front of him and lined up behind him, and Caesar would travel in the middle. So when he would leave Rome, he
All
would
the dust
actually
would
see
pick up.
all of this dust, and people would see this cloud of all the soldiers and Caesar leaving. He'd be gone for a season off to war, and then he would return. And as he was returning, what would happen is all of Rome would stop and look, and they would see the cloud. And when they would know the soldiers are returning home, that Caesar's coming back, and Rome would get silent. And everybody would be listening for this moment where they would yell whether there was victory or not. And they would be listening for one word, gospel. Gospel means good news. It means Caesar has won the victory. The battle was successful. So I think John's hoping, cliffhanger moment, guys. Guess what? Jesus is returning. He's coming on a cloud. And so this whole section is about Jesus.
That's good.
Well, if you look at verse 10, John wants to unpack, starting to unpack what the description of Jesus, but also he says it was the Lord's day and I was worshiping in the Spirit. So before like looking at the next section, what do you feel like that means? Like he's in the Lord's day and he was worshiping in the Spirit.
I love it. He says Jesus is Alpha and Omega, and it's the Lord's day. We mentioned it on Sunday. It's this picture that Jesus is first and last. The Lord's day would be the center. Jesus can be trusted. He's reliable. You can count on him.
When they said that, you said they were waiting to hear the word gospel, would they have been waiting to hear a trumpet also? Would that
Oh,
have
yeah.
proclaimed something was coming?
Yeah, the blast would always be the thing that would precede the announcement, gospel.
So when John is hearing this in a trumpet, what he's waiting to hear then is, what is the good news that I'm about to hear? And Jesus lays it out right there,
Yeah.
which is so good. You had mentioned in verse 12, we start seeing some of the pictures of who Jesus is. And I think it's important, I mean, John is someone who walked with Jesus. He's writing to a group of people that might have actually walked with Jesus also. So when John is laying this out, I think a lot of people still had the wrong image of who Jesus was. And I think a lot of people in the Roman world were still picturing a crucified Messiah, which is what Jesus was. I think Jesus is, and what John is doing through the writing, is helping us see not necessarily a crucified Jesus, but a victorious Jesus.
Yes.
And so when he lays it out, and I know we talk about it on Sunday, but there's the long robe, then the gold sash, and the sword from his mouth. I mean, John is establishing him, some Old Testament stuff, but as a prophet, a priest, and a king, which is huge to do. There's a few other things we see in this, though, that, again, when I picture Jesus, I still picture this first century,
Messiah,
the crucified
carpenter.
Messiah, not this, flowing robe with white hair as like wool and eyes on fire and a sword from the mouth. And so what is some of this, why is he describing Jesus looking like this? What's some of the imagery we should be picturing?
Well, could you imagine like being a first century follower of Jesus? You're facing Rome, the empire, the biggest known kingdom at the time. How weak would you feel?
Yeah.
Well, the persecution that would just come from that, I don't know if we can really comprehend that in today's world. Like, they just say like, hey, we risk death every day. We risk, and so like having an image of John's getting this visual of the description of Jesus of being victorious, not just suffering, but being victorious. Of like, oh, he's bigger than Rome. He's bigger than Caesar. Like, and I think it gives. We start looking at in Revelation of like hope. What does that mean?
Yeah. I think he wants us to see Jesus way more powerful than we ever imagined. How big is your God? How much do you love him? So it'd be fun for us in group, and we'll look at a couple of them here. He gives these attributes. He talks about his hair, his eyes, his feet, his voice, his face. We talked on Sunday about what he wore, what was coming out of his mouth. Let's look at a couple of them.
Yeah.
One is his eyes were like flames of fire. So it's this picture of this God who is fierce, who sees, who is strong.
Yeah.
It says his feet were like polished bronze. Now, that would have come from somewhere. They would have thought from that. Do you guys know where that came from?
The King Nebuchadnezzar statue in Daniel.
That's right, yeah. Nebuchadnezzar has this dream in Daniel chapter 10.
Yeah.
And in that dream, there's actually this picture of the statue, and the statue's feet were made of what? Do you guys remember?
Iron and clay.
Iron and clay.
Yeah, and it goes through different timelines of civilizations, I guess you could. So you have the gold of Babylon, and it works its way down. So is he establishing Jesus' kingdom as something that has no end? Is that what the polished bronze?
Yeah, the idea is this, is that the kingdoms of this world that seem so powerful have feet of iron and clay, but the kingdom that Jesus is establishing is feet of bronze. Bronze is actually made of iron, which is strong, but not clay. It's actually made of iron and copper, which copper won't rust, and it also is flexible. So it's the surest foundation that you could imagine, and it's been tested by fire.
And I was reading too in the NLT Study Bible that you guys have. It's like it said, refined or hardened bronze on the feet implies stability, firmness, and security. And I just think that we look at the characteristics of Jesus, like he's stable, he has firmness and security that we can have in him, that we can trust in him. And I think John really uses the aspects of like really intentionally look at, okay, his feet were like polished bronze and copper, right? And so the connection of both.
That's good.
I love
Looking at eyes, flame of fire, and then voice like a mighty ocean wave. I know first century, there was a few things that were uncontrollable. So things that humans knew, there's nothing I can do to tame the ocean. That was something that was just wild, like our Wild West was their ocean. So it was uncontrollable, and same with fire. And so it's interesting to see, as he describes this, you're saying, how big is your God? John's saying, hey, everything that you thought couldn't be under his control, fire and ocean, it's actually like, that's just a part of his being. He's so much more greater than what you thought was unmanageable.
Yeah, he builds even towards the end here to the 7 stars that he saw in his right hand.
Yeah, I was kind of confused about that, and I know, a bit further down it brings it up. What are these 7 stars?
Well, when the people would hear 7 stars, they would think of the 7 unfixed stars, which would be the 7 known planets at that time. That's what they would imagine.
Okay.
In fact, the people there, they were very into astrology. They saw the stars as being able to read the future. They actually worshiped them as gods. And so what I love about it, it says, Jesus holds your
It's just right
gods,
here.
basically the pantheon of Rome, holds them in his hand.
That's good.
He has power and authority. Means this, that God isn't the stars. God is actually in charge of the stars, right? It says the 7 lampstands, and then the 7 stars are the angels.
What
So he
does that
says
mean?
these stars you see are these angels.
Yeah.
Well, they would think of angels like demigods or something to be worshipped. And John seems to be making them as messengers that are leading and communicating and talking to the churches.
That's good.
So
So, he's
there-
again continuing to elevate who God is, not just here, but actually in the cosmos. We see him as in charge of all things. Jesus says, I am the living one. I died, but look, I'm alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and the grave. In my group last night, we actually kind of talked a little bit about this, and we glossed over it. And it kind of took a moment. I looked back and said, man, I wonder if people would have cheered when they first read that. And why it might not mean a ton to us now, but what would that have meant as the first century believers were reading that?
Well, we all know keys, right? You know, if I had like a Porsche or a Tesla or some awesome car and I said, and I threw the keys and said, you get to drive. Like you'd feel freedom.
Yeah.
You'd feel excited. Or a 16-year-old who just got their license, right? There's freedom. Keys are a sign of authority. They're the one who's in charge, right? And it's this picture that God has put Jesus in charge of everything, even in charge of death,
Wow, okay.
which is awesome.
That's good.
Hey, so people are going to be talking about this in groups. There's a ton to talk about in this. Jesus is so big. Talk about how much power, how much authority, how big our God is, and how amazing Jesus is in your groups.
Cool. Cool. Well, thank you guys. Hope you're having a great first or second week of group, and we'll catch you next week.